What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Seoul Therapy, the podcast. My name is Daniel.
Daytona.
Today, we will be talking about some of our favorite K-hip hop albums and why we think they are considered classics. As usual, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our podcast on all streaming platforms, and don't forget to give us that 5-star rating. Also, for more contents, please go and follow our socials at soul_therapy, and also please support our page on Patreon at patreon.com/soul_therapy. What is considered a classic album? Well, to me, I define classic as a way to have a longevity. You know, an album has to have its longevity and has to be able to age well. You know, kind of like a wine. You know, it has to age like fine wine. And there's a lot of Korean hip hop albums out there that are considered classics by many fans and many community and many hip hop culture in Korea. They consider such and such a classic albums, and what we decided to do is to pick out two what we think are considered classic albums from the old school era and two albums from the new school era. And so we're gonna just kind of like dive into that. And one of the I consider this as a classic album is Deepflow's Heavy Deep album, which came out in 2011. I think it's one of the more underrated albums that people don't.
Yeah, it's not mentioned.
Yeah, it's definitely not mentioned, and I don't get why, because this is like probably an introduction to kind of like a Korean like Rick Ross type, and this album kind of definitely feels that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would view it as classic. Yes. And most of the people, when we think about Deepflow, because we usually think about Yanghwa or the recent album Founder. Right. And I still think they are better records than Heavy Deep.
Yeah.
But Heavy Deep holds a place in hip hop history, in my opinion. Yes.
It really does. It's an album that you kind of just forget about, you know what I mean? It just kind of like passes through your ears, and then
it's overshadowed.
It is very overshadowed. And like when you mention, or if somebody were to bring up, hey, have you ever heard of Deepflow's Heavy Deep? Then you'll be like, oh yeah, right, I forgot about that album. That's what it feels like. But it's such a heavy presence album, because back then Deepflow,
it's a very hardcore album.
It is very hardcore. Deepflow had that very, poise, that very heavy presence that you kind of see in a rapper. And really, Deepflow really epitomized that album title, Heavy Deep. And no, I'm serious. It's he has a song called
I mean, it's just amusing. He has
a song called Still My Flow Part 2, and
that's an homage to the original Still My Flow from his first album
called This Major album. And so when you look at Deepflow and his catalog, he doesn't have like too many catalogs, but like you said,
4 albums.
4 albums, and like you said, Yanghwa and like Founder, those are like kind of like what most people kind of listen to. But I think Heavy Deep has this real like kind of like a shadow, where you don't like, you would kind of be like, I didn't know Deepflow had this type of album.
Yeah, it's very interesting because if you look at Deepflow's history, by the way, 4 albums is actually pretty extensive in Korean hip hop standards.
Right.
Like, really, rappers don't put out a lot of albums here. If you look at Deepflow's history, he was first on the rise in the Big Deal Squad and the Big Deal Records. Big Deal Records was a hardcore hip hop outfit within like the first stages of Korean hip hop. And what was interesting is that he, like, if you listen to his first album, you'll notice like Big Deal really had some East Coast records, like very hard hitting Pete Rock, Mobb Deep, that kind of hardcore hip hop. And Heavy Deep is not that kind of album. It's more about the Southern trap boom shit, right? The Rick Ross, Port of Miami kind of things. And this kind of exemplifies an interesting point in Korean hip hop, because we don't have regional differences that much. We are a small country. Although there are some regional flavors, it's not as accentuated as it is in the States.
Right.
So if it hits hard, it kind of when if it's any genre, like be it trap, boom shit, or be it hardcore '90s East Coast stuff, if it hits hard, there is a tendency for rappers to do both of them
Mhm.
anyway. You know what I
Right.
mean? In Korean hip hop, because to us it kind of speaks to the similar crowds.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? As long as you're rhyming properly, as long as like it sounds quote unquote macho enough or
Yeah.
something, if it's heavy enough, like it's not that much of a difference to the Korean audience's eyes.
Yeah.
Not just talking about the masses here, but according to like in Manian, like in the hip hop circle as well,
Mhm.
like they have a similar kind of fan base. So I think D-Flow's catalog kind of exemplifies that well. Like this major album was a boom bap
Yeah.
album, was a quintessential boom bap
Sure,
album.
yeah.
Heavy Deep is really southern inspired,
Mhm.
and then you look at his later records, it's a mixture of both, right?
Exactly.
Especially Yanghua is like, especially his next record, Yanghua is just like it's just a hardcore album. You can't categorize if it's boom bap or
It's
trap
also
because
groundbreaking too.
it's yeah, it exists in this it exists in the same concept within the
Mhm.
album. It exists in this similar like soundscape.
Right.
So, and for the fourth album, Founder, he goes in a soul band record.
Yeah.
Like he goes into like the Adrian Young kind of
Mhm.
territory. So this means that like Heavy Deep kind of signifies a kind of point in Korean history, hip hop history, where like in retrospect tells you about like everything I just said right now, how like it's like regarded in the similar cultural vein.
Mhm.
And Heavy Deep also has a lot of references to Hongdae,
Right, yeah.
which is again way more accentuated in the Yanghua album. But like Heavy Deep is, if Yanghua is more about the transition and the disparity between like Yanghua and Hongdae, like Heavy Deep is strictly about Hongdae.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like there are references is there I don't exactly remember the record that well, but there's a song called 이구역의 미친놈은 나야 or something like that.
Mm.
I'm the crazy dude in the zone with Chiguin, I
Oh
think.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And there's like references to Hongdae in that song and probably other songs as well. So it's more like a homage to like the hardcore movement itself in
Mhm.
Hongdae. So that's kind of another thing to look out for that record. A lot. The record pretty aged pretty well.
It
Like
really did.
it doesn't sound stylistically it's a bit dated because obviously we're not into that kind of like maximalized trap
Mhm.
anymore. But it's not like it sounds dated because of the recording is bad or
Mm.
something. Like the first Deepflow album, the way he's rapping and the way it's recorded, it sounds dusty as
It
fuck.
does, yeah.
It didn't age well. But this album actually has clean mixing. Like this album has the kind of engineering standards that we have right now, so it kind of aged well. So I think I know why you see it as a classic. Like it lives up to your standard of aging like wine, I
And
guess.
I love how in that album or Deep Flow back in the day, he what was it? He had an assistance with Ven. He was like an R&B kind of singer. And
Yeah, I think he's still in this major. Am I wrong?
last time I don't think I've seen his name in the roster.
Yeah, granted, he kind of disappeared.
But
Yeah.
yeah, Ven really I would say kind of helped Deep Flow go to a new
Mm,
type of sound. And in
mm.
Heavy D there's like two tracks with Ven and it's quite different from what you would expect from Deep Flow. But
Yeah,
it works.
yeah, this was in 2011. Like this was a period in time where trap was taking over.
Right.
And I think D-Flow really had to find a method to kind of stay hardcore without being limited to boom bap.
Mhm.
And this was his answer, and it worked out. Like this was one of the foundational records that kind of like still gave him like presence within the scene, and this probably kind of was important in transitioning this major to a crew from a label,
Mm.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I can definitely see it. Like 10 tracks, it hits hard, no bullshit.
No,
So
definitely not.
yeah,
Yeah, so that is one of my it's not old, but to me it feels old, and
mm,
so that's why I categorize as like like an old school.
It is old.
Yeah. And so
2011 is old at this point. It's 10 years.
true. And for my second old school album, I kind of went with a more underground, and I went with Fana, Fanatic, and
Yeah, that is bona fide
yeah,
classics. Yeah,
exactly.
that's a
See,
bona fide classic.
for people that
Yeah,
don't know, Fana is my goodness.
he's our doom.
Oh, what could I say about him?
He's our doom.
Yeah. Um,
He's definitely our doom.
oh, this album, Fanatic, this dropped in 2009, and
Mm,
like, damn, it's such a gritty album. Um,
mm.
this album is a typical boom bap, but it has like this really jazzy, dark tone to it. It's very dark, the
Yeah,
album.
it's a very noir
It
jazz
is,
kind of.
yeah.
Yeah.
It almost feels like you can place this album in, like, kind of like gangster type movies, like those crime
Yeah, I can see
type
that.
movies, and he's just such a different artist. I mean, I remember when Soul Company was on the rise, and then The
Mm,
Quiet was there, Pento was there. It's like that whole
mm.
roster was just emerging, and then you had this cat named
Yeah.
Fana, and like I heard this dude, I was like, dude, this guy is something different. Like his tone is
Yeah,
so husky. It's so
monster-esque.
it is, and like damn, I feel like Fana is the type of rapper that can do well, like in the really old school era, but also in the new school era. Like
Yeah, he can definitely age. He aged well as an
he really
artist.
did.
Like, obviously, commercially, he has no sway whatsoever.
No,
But yeah,
I don't
but
think he's the type of rapper.
his artistry never died.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think he's the type of rapper that would go for like that mainstream, like, chart topping stuff. And dude, this album, there's like a song called The Masquerade. Um,
Yeah,
oh,
that's his classic. That's his.
wow.
If we remove every like, if we have to like pick one great song, it's that one. Like, I mean, there's so many great songs on there. To our listeners, did we mention Fauna before in this podcast?
Briefly. We talked about him briefly.
Yeah, that's not enough. Okay. Fauna is, as I just said earlier, Fauna is our MF Doom.
Yes.
That's it. Like the biggest reason why Fana is important and famous within the hip hop scene is because of his rhyme
Mm,
schemes. It's harder to find a word that doesn't rhyme on
yeah.
Fana's
Mm-hmm.
lyrics. Like, you know how like Doom like rhymed every fucking
Yeah,
syllable?
it's very complex.
Fana does that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's hard to find syllables that doesn't rhyme in Hana's
Mm,
records. And of course, since most of you don't know Korean, it will not like rub off that way. But this kind of rhyme scheme makes it possible for him to rap on any beat.
yeah.
Same with Doom. Like, if you look at MF Doom records, like there's a lot of tempos
Mm,
and the reason he can still like kind of go through that kind of still sound effortless on it is because it is rhymed so heavily. Like, even if you have a monotone flow, like it
it
works
does, yeah.
because yeah, you don't even have to accentuate your words. That's why Doom can rap on any record. It's the same for Hana. Like, no matter what tempo it is, like it doesn't fucking matter.
He's just insane,
Um,
bro.
to me, there's largely two kinds of
Mm-hmm.
rappers. One are rappers that ride on the beat,
Mm,
and the other is the rappers with flows that kind of barrels through the beat.
exactly,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? And usually, what happens is, if you're riding on the beat, you lack a certain intensity.
Mm-hmm.
But if you barrel through the beat, it's really intense, but it's very hard to be smooth
Yeah.
on it. The reason why Doom is great is because he barrels through the beat, but he doesn't exactly barrel through the beat. He kind of goes in like a very hot knife through butter or
Yeah.
something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly what Juana does in his
Mm,
records. Like, it's effortless because the rhyme scheme is so heavy. He sounds so smooth on any kind of beat, even though he has such husky tone to his voice.
yeah, his
And
flows are nasty.
yeah,
It's
and
crazy, dude.
yeah, and the other thing about Juana is that he's just not just like rapidy rapping here.
No.
He's not doing the like 2021 Eminem
Mm-mm.
bullshit. Like, he's being very conceptual with his
Mm.
lyrics. Like he's one of the most creative lyricists that Korean hip hop has to offer. Like the song Masquerade, which is basically
Insane.
like
Yeah.
which is just like which is just basically a masquerade. He's describing a masquerade,
Mm.
a masked ball, but he puts in these vocabulary and nuances to expand the narrative so that he's not actually talking about masquerade. He's more talking about the hypocrisy and the what do you call it? The hypocrisy of human
Mm.
nature, of how everyone is backstabbing each other. How you can't really know what it is to know what the other person is thinking
Mhm.
in the current hyper-capitalistic society and stuff like
Mhm.
that. In modern civilization, and that kind of he's talking about social distrust among its members, and it's done in a way that is so like literature-wise amazing.
Yo, it's insane.
Yeah, there's so many songs like this. There's another song called Rhymatic Storm. This is actually a bit more
Mhm.
famous because it spoke more directly
Yeah.
than the Masquerade. Anyway, Rhymatic Storm is basically him putting together words in from the StarCraft game.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Like the words you're using in that, like the way he's like boasting about his skills, he uses words from the StarCraft
Oh, that's
universe.
pretty
That's why
cool.
it's called Rhymatic Storm.
That's pretty
Instead
cool.
of Psionic Storm by the High Templar, it's like the Rhymatic Storm. It's nerdish. It's nerdish as fuck. But the way he pulls it off, makes it sound incredibly dope. It's basically nerdcore hip hop in a sense, but
Hey man, that's what makes
he
him unique.
uses yeah, like every word he uses is not like I'm rhyme better than you. He's rhyming better than you, but he's using the metaphor in the StarCraft universe.
Yeah.
So it's like yeah, naturally you see why it would have been very kind of impactful for Korean listeners because StarCraft is
It is,
huge
yeah.
here.
Mhm.
Like not now.
Before, yeah.
StarCraft 2 kind of failed in Korea, but the original StarCraft and the StarCraft Brood War was a very quintessential part of the 90s and 2000s
Right.
internet culture. There's literally no Korean man that doesn't know how to play
Mm.
StarCraft. The whole pro gamer shtick that Koreans have about us being the best gamers in the world, that shit started with StarCraft.
It is,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, the internet culture here is very heavily focused on gaming, and that's why I said like way back, like Korea is basically one of the archetypes of cyberpunk. The reason is this is one of the reasons why. Like, I know it's not the case in many Western countries, but gaming is inseparable from the Korean teenage experience,
Yeah.
nor is it from like the college student experience. Like you know how to game, like not knowing how to game, and you're a Korean male, you're naturally an outsider.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And StarCraft was the start of that. So you naturally see, like, because Fana writing songs like this, like listeners back then will be like, yeah, this is the shit kind of
Mhm.
thing. You know what I mean? So that is, and that kind of lyrical execution, that kind of topical focus that not a lot of rappers had, the topical focus and the creativity, is what made Juana such a big MC and is still a big MC right now.
Yeah.
Um, Granted, this was the case for like about the first three records, and now he's more on the mental health side of
Mm.
things. He still has the rhyme schemes, he still has the potent pen, he still has the bars, but it's mostly about his depressed nature.
Mm.
Like the dude is going through some shit.
Yeah.
I think because Hwana is a very symbolic figure in that because he never tried to sell out, I
No,
guess.
he's a quiet dude.
The financial success was never his
Mhm.
mission, and he has a junction. It's literally called a junction, the Ugly Junction. He had a club, I think,
Mhm.
that's called the Ugly Junction, and that Ugly Junction is responsible for birthing so many superstars right now.
Mhm.
Like Kundi Panda got through that club.
Mm.
Jackie Y was first discovered by Hwanan
Oh
and stuff
wow.
like that. Yeah, like the Ugly Junction is responsible for putting a lot of underground rookies to the mainstream, or at least what we call mainstream in the hip hop scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Fana, not only as an artist, left a huge musical mark in how far lyricism can go, but so many people in the underground as a culture are indebted to him as well. So not knowing his music is kind of like showing yourself you're not really into Korean hip hop
Mm.
kind of thing.
No, it's
So like for the street cred, for the Korean hip hop street cred, you need to know who Fana is, and it's the same thing. Like you say you're into hip hop, but you don't know Doom.
mhm.
It's suspect. It's sus. You know.
I guess what I want to say is like I really want like the listeners to go and check this album out because whether it might not be your taste or not, I think it's really important
Mm,
to take a listen to this album.
it warrants to listen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there's a reason
I
why.
fucking listen to his entire
Yeah,
catalog.
like there's a reason why he's like even though he's not popular by the public,
Mm.
like his music lives a long time and I think it's an important piece of history in the Korean hip hop culture and so yeah.
Yeah, just quick mention
Mhm.
here. By the way, it's not just big his greatness as a rapper, but he chooses his beats and he arranges his
Mm.
music very well. Like these are musically very potent records as well. The way the beats are constructed, and especially like not this record, but as his discography progresses, like if you listen to records like Hanaconda or
Mhm.
Fanabis, like shit is amazing, like sonically amazing, the production scape and everything. Like just listen to his entire catalog. It's musically, it's lyrically, performance wise, it's fucking perfect.
Yeah.
So definitely listen to it. It will not be a waste of time. He's one of the certified OGs in
Yeah.
the Korean hip hop. Just because he doesn't exactly have a company, but I don't think he's interested in that
Yeah.
anyway. He's lyrical. He's like about the culture through and through and through. So
Exactly.
he's like, he's practically like the hermit. Like you see in like action
Oh
movies,
yeah.
like the recluse to hermit
Yeah.
kind of character, where like the protagonist goes there to like learn like to train and stuff
Right.
like that. This is the dude. There's two people like that, and one of them is Fana.
Agree.
The other is JJK, but yeah, we're talking about Fana here. So anyway,
Yeah, he's definitely a legend and so
mm,
my other two which we're moving on to the new school for me is again
mm.
not new school but somewhere in the middle and it's yeah
Contemporary.
contemporary and it's with Kunta's crew called Rude Paper and the
Yeah,
album's called Destroy Babylon and Daytona you mentioned this
that's a
before.
cool ass title.
Yeah, you mentioned this album before and I got hooked onto it and this is something that I've never heard of, especially reggae movement in Korea, since reggae movement in Korea is not like extremely big or anything like that. Um,
Yeah,
this album to me is a classic because it's something that I've never heard of. It's refreshing, but it's also, I would say, something that it's gonna help Kunta soon because now
mm.
that Kunta is part of Show Me the Money and he's getting known, I hope people can check out his discography and see that he's kind of like one of the leading pioneers in the reggae movement in Korea because we
Yeah.
haven't had a reggae movement like you know big or that lasted for a long
We
time.
never did.
Yeah, it never did.
Not for a long time. We never did.
Yeah, and this album, Destroy Babylon, it's just insane. It's a mix of like dubstep, reggae, hip hop,
Yeah.
kind of trap, like all you would want, like all you want in like a hip hop track. Like this album has it, but it's also a mixture of reggae because that's what they're known for and that's what they do best. And so,
Like, yeah, like Kunta is known for that.
mm-hmm,
There are prominent reggae figures in Korean hip hop. The other probably being
Skull,
Skull.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. But actually Kush called it
yeah,
was with Stony
Kush
Skunk,
would be another one.
which is what. Yeah, but anyway, but Kunta is the one who really experimented a lot. Like he was trying to recontextualize reggae in a sense that it would fit into this age. That's why he tried to like fuse it with electronica sometimes
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. Like he tried a lot of sonical palettes to kind of reinforce his reggae image and persona, which is not a lot of what people expect or people do. He has a collaboration project with New Orleans and stuff like
Yeah, that's
that.
another good album.
Granted, by the way, trigger warning, warning here. I don't. The whole destroy Babylon is might be kind of an offensive title in
Mm,
a sense,
yeah.
but people who are not Christian. but this is not that much Christianity focused,
Mhm.
so that this is not a preaching ass album. I think Babylon works more as a metaphor for nihilism
Mm,
or that kind, like the ills of current
yeah.
society, rather than it being a religious statement that
No, I don't
like,
see that.
yeah, it's not that. So you don't have to expect bigotry in this album. Um, this is classic because for one reason only. Um, by my standards, because I think you and I have pretty different standards as to what classic
Right,
is,
yeah.
Daniel. But because if this album is not classic, that's more of an indictment, not on this record, but more on the Korean reggae movement.
Yeah.
This album, because if this album is not classic, it means that reggae itself is not that influential in Korea.
Mhm.
This is one of the finest achievements that reggae has to offer,
Yeah.
and Korean reggae being the location that it is in, it's very connected to hip hop.
It really is, yeah.
Like, yeah, because there's not that much of a huge black music community here,
Mhm.
so it's like we all know each other.
Exactly.
The jazz men know the funk men, and the funk men know the R&B men, and the R&B men know the hip hop men, and the hip hop men, that's what I mean here. Like the hip hop people know every other people, like across all black genres. That's how it is here.
Mm,
Black music is kind of lumped together,
right.
not because of a lack of talent,
Mhm.
or not because we have the wrong cultural
Of
understanding,
course.
but because we have no choice but to.
Mhm.
If you don't do this, you're either in like the K-pop EDM category, or you're doing punk and indie rock in Hongdae.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So there's not like we have to stick to each other for, in a sense, for survival.
Right.
Otherwise, like where you're going to find the session men and stuff like that. Anyway, this record is more of a testament that Korean reggae exists and is alive,
Mhm.
and that uh, it's not like a dead genre. This is a very creative album. I think we did talk about this album a
Yeah,
little
just a
time
brief,
before,
yeah.
and I actually recommended
Mhm.
this, right? Yeah, Kunta has and Root Paper especially has more experimental records than this.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, the reason why this album is classic is because it is less experimental from the
Yeah,
others.
I
This is
I
more roots
figure,
reggae
yeah.
focused. Yeah, because the other Root Paper album is like super electronic
Mhm.
influenced.
Yeah.
Kunta's solo album recently was very electronic
Yeah.
influenced, except the vocal passages, like the production was just straight up EDM with a little bit of reggae
Mhm.
tempo. And this Destroy Babylon is more about experimentalism within the context of roots reggae.
Mm.
So it's like a little bit more traditionalist,
Mm.
and that's what makes it classic, ironically.
But you also get the best of
Um,
both worlds in that album. You get a mix of a
yeah,
little
yeah,
bit of
that's
everything.
exactly what I
Yeah.
mean. Yeah. Like Kunta is a very progressive kind of figure when it comes to musical
Mhm.
movements. Like, and this was where he toned down that a little bit and tried to go back to his roots, like to go back to reggae's roots,
Mhm.
and it succeeded. Like, even look at the fucking title. Like, it sounds very kind of Christian influenced.
Mhm.
So it's a great record. Definitely check it out. We kind of talked about it already, but I'm gonna talk about it again. I'm gonna say it again. This is just a great fucking record.
Yeah.
So especially with Kunta being on Show Me the Money
That's gonna
10
help a lot.
doing so
Yeah.
well. I hope these kind of records will get their shine
Exactly.
because they really deserve it. So
Definitely.
yeah,
And
definitely. They lyrically, melodically, performance wise, the production, the sequencing. I don't find a big flaw within this record,
yeah.
so I see why no reason why this shouldn't be a classic. I guess
Yeah.
definitely listen to it.
And
Yeah,
so for my second one, it stays on the year
mm.
of 2016. It's Nuxai's first album, The God of Small Things.
God of Small Things. Yeah.
Oh man, Nuxai. Nuxai. I mean,
Hmm.
he's just a straight rapper. Pure rapper. Every word,
Yeah.
he pronounces his words so clearly to the point where you just like, wow, this is amazing. And
Yeah. I actually suggest Noxer for people who are trying to learn Korean.
no, that's a great
Yeah.
recommendation. No, I would
You
have done
can
the same
hear
thing.
every word, like you said, and his pen game is really very
It's
poetic.
crazy.
So
This
it's a
album,
great way to, yeah.
Man,
It's a great way to learn Korean.
it really is, and especially
Yeah.
with this album. And look, he doesn't have he only has like two albums, which one came out
Mm.
last year, and then the first one was 2016. But man, the God of Small Things, dude, that's such a, I would say, another timeless classic because Nuxa is the rapper that that really respects and embodies that pure hip hop culture, right?
The art of
The
hip
art of
hop.
hip hop,
Yes.
and especially with this
Mm.
album, The God of Small Things, man, like it's a boom bap hip hop album. Maybe there's like one or two tracks that are slightly introducing kind of like that trap game, but like all
But it still has soul
it
samples most
it
of the
does,
time,
yeah.
so it's like, yeah,
There's a song called
this is a very traditionalist album.
I Got Bills, Earn Your Keep featuring
I
Kunta.
got bills today.
I figured you were
Yeah,
gonna go there. That's such a good song. And
yeah,
One Mic, The God of
yeah.
Small
That
Things.
was an indictment on Show Me the Money 4.
Mm. And
That was
then
a diss on that. Yeah, I'll get into that. Yeah, talk your shit, man.
yeah, Earn Your Keep probably is my favorite featuring Kunta because
Mm.
that production was produced by Code Kunst.
Oh,
And
it's called Earn Your Keep in
yeah,
English, huh?
and
Yeah, that's a good translation. Yeah.
it's produced by
I
Code
mean, the
Kunst,
lyrics to
and
that.
so yeah, the lyrics are insane. But the production
Yeah.
wise on Code by Code Kunst, it's so, like you said, it's a dusty type beat, very
Mm.
grimy, raw. It's just
That chorus though.
yeah, it's
That
just
that that hook too, like.
again, Kunta just fits well. If you give him the right beats, Kunta's gonna tear it up. And
No, I think it's more than that. I think like Kunta manages to find us to like fit into whatever beat that is given to him. It's like the dude's a genius.
yeah,
Like
it really is.
seriously. Yeah.
This album in general, man, like really, it's just straight hip hop. If you're looking for just a straight hip hop album, The God of Small Things, it's very poetic too. There's a lot of
Yeah, it's
it's very lyrical,
I
very lyrical.
Earn Your Keep is one of the few songs that actually made me cry. It
Really,
really helped me through some tough times. Like one of the I'm getting a little personal here, but
no worries.
in my first years of college, I used to work at the school like English newspaper,
Mm,
and Korean college club activities are really something else.
mm,
And being as privileged as I am, it sounds pretentious, I know, but the college I go to is a pretty prestigious one.
mm,
There's a university that's called abbreviated to the Sky League
mm,
in Korea. It's the acronym really is ironic. It's called Sky because it is the top three universities
mm-hmm.
in Korea. Seoul University, which is our Harvard.
Right.
Then there's the Korea University, which is like our Princeton Yale kind
And
of
then
ish
Yonsei.
thing, and then Yonsei, which is another Princeton Yale kind
Mm-hmm.
of ish. And I currently go to Korea University.
Nice.
I'm still enrolled. Granted, it's not because I'm lazy. It's because I had to have military service.
Right.
So I'm trying my best, my listeners. I'm not a lazy fuck. But anyway, in my first year of college in Korea University, I was in the school newspaper, and there are a lot of drama, public fund being embezzled like that, a lot of bullshit,
Mm-hmm.
and it really made me kind of the pessimistic asshole that I am right now. Like the first year of college was really the period in which I realized that people are fucking assholes and humanity is a failure.
Mm-hmm.
It really awakened my misanthropic kind of side. Like so many motherfuckers like that don't deserve what they're and anyway. And Earn Your Keep was the song that one of the songs that really kept me anchored.
Mm-hmm.
The hook on that song about
Yeah,
let me look it up again. Do you have the translations actually?
I do
You
not.
don't? Like if you're listening to Noxal albums, please look up the translations because the guy's lyrics are a huge point in why you're listening to
Yeah.
him. He's one of the most poetic. He's our common in a sense almost. Um it's like it's about constantly having to hustle, not because of like some glorious attitude or some kind of delusions of grandeur. It's more about having to survive
Yeah.
off of just pure. That's all you have to do. That's the only thing you can do here.
Mhm.
First of all, that encompasses like what soul is perfectly,
Mm.
where it's a free market, but it's actually a phrase I used to like a lot. It's a free market,
Mhm.
but the participation is forced.
Mm.
That's basically soul. It's a free world, but you have to be part of it no matter what.
Right.
It's a free competition for everyone, but there's never the option where you don't want to compete.
Wow.
And that's a case for the capitalistic world order, definitely. But Seoul is one of those cities, and Korea as well in general, where that is like hyperinflated. Like, I'm very skeptic as of to how many countries will be this competitive
Mhm.
from like the moment you're out of the womb.
Yeah.
We're not talking about like transition into society. We have been competitive since we flopped into the crib.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
From like when we're fucking kindergartners. And this song, coming from that kind of background, this song really speaks to people like me and
Mm.
probably a lot of other people as well. You're constantly locked up in this grind of you're not grinding yourself, it's more like you're being grinded
Yeah.
rather than like participating in the grind. And this song is about how like you don't actually think about what you're going to eat. You don't think about who you're going to eat it with. The very fact that you're eating itself is kind of a gratitude moment here.
Uh-huh.
And he puts this kind of message out in a very poetic,
Yeah.
again, a very heartwarming way, so that he acknowledges the problematic grind set within Korea, but kind of tries to comfort the listener in saying that there's still someone that is going to pick you up no matter what. And in this song, it's his mother.
Mhm.
And even in the music video, like there's a music video
Mhm.
for this. I suggest you cop it. The music video is shown in the perspective of a dollar bill. In
Uh,
Korea, it's 1,000 won, right?
yeah.
And this bill gets passed around as people buy things from each other.
Mm.
And it starts with this kid paying a $10 bill to buy this CD,
Mm.
the God of Small Things CD, physical CD. And this bill goes around and around, 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 and around until it comes back to his mother.
Mm.
It passes around a street vendor, it goes to a prostitute, and I don't exactly remember the details. Anyway, the bill goes around, and it eventually comes back to the music video protagonist's mother,
Mhm.
which she uses to cook a meal for the son, the protagonist. So it really shows how like there's a lot of messages in that music video, because if you think about it, that dollar bill represents the current system that we're kind of trapped in.
All right.
Everyone has to grind for their every own other reason, and the common factor of those reasons is survival. You have to do no matter what you by any means necessary, you have to survive. And being this state of mind that I was in college, it was like I don't want to do this shit
Yeah.
anymore. Like the people suck. I never knew like journalism was this kind of dirty and
Mhm.
this much bullshit. But you still have to do it because that kind of portfolio, that kind of this resume kind of details everything for the Korean who is in their
All
20s.
right.
That one line in the resume can really decide your fate for the next 80 years of your life.
Mm.
So I had to do it. And the Korean 20s, like being 20 in Korea and being 20 anywhere actually at this point in your 20s, we're stuck in a world where we constantly have to make the bad choices of sacrificing our own happiness for our survival.
Mhm.
This is no longer a civilization where we are collectively striving for the greater good or our collective happiness. This is more of a chicken game.
Mm.
And like this kind of song really made me kind of, maybe it's an illusion, maybe it's a comfort, or whatever it is, kind of believe on myself again in a
Yeah,
sort.
that's good.
Yeah, kind of thinking like, maybe there's something, maybe some superficial reason for having to live on, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And the album as a whole definitely has a place in my heart,
Yeah.
but that song especially is just look at the translations,
Yeah.
look at the music video. I think you'll still find it. I think you have to type in the Korean, but yeah. I this is, and I'm sure a lot of people have these kind of
Yeah.
experiences, and a lot of people probably have very worse experiences compared to I am,
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, this is like a college student's kind of
Yeah.
um
But still.
rant. I mean, there's too many people. I'm so blessed to be having to be born in a very privileged background, and I
Mhm.
still feel this kind of way.
Mhm.
Like that I'm being grinded into dust. Like think about factory workers.
Yeah.
Think about people who have to think about delivery
Yeah.
workers and stuff like that. In this fucked up world, I just hope that this podcast kind of offers you a small comfort
Mm.
in the crazy world and the abusive and
Yeah.
exploitative world that we are living in right now.
Mhm.
The first I'll go with DJ Soulscape's 180 gram
Oh
beats.
my goodness. Why didn't I not think of that one? Damn.
This was, I think, in the year
Yeah.
2000. Like this
Super
goes like back
old.
20
Yeah.
years. So yeah. DJ Soulscape is a legendary figure. And he's also like not just in the scale of Korean hip hop either. I think he has personal connections with DJ Premier.
Mm.
Yeah, they shout each other out all the time, and it's crazy. Like he's one of the very proud Koreans I have. uh, he's one of the proud Koreans that no one knows about.
Mhm.
No one knows about. And 180 gram beats is significant in two ways. First, it's still amazing. It's still amazing, and it has one of the most innovative like sampling techniques
Mm.
that Korean hip hop has to offer. This is like our introducing. Um,
Yeah. Good comparison.
yeah, it really is. Because DJ Soulscape was he's a very chill dude,
Yeah.
but back then he was a little bit frustrated. I think
Mm.
he was one of those people who are like, well, if you're not chopping samples and just looping them, you're a whack idiot kind of guy.
Right.
And so, granted, I think he changed his stance because no, at the end of the day, if you're sampling and you give your pay your dues, it doesn't fucking matter
Of
in my
course.
opinion.
Yeah.
Good sampling is good
Mhm.
sampling. Chopping this shit up and culminating like a lot of samples from different records and compiling them into one is one of the most basic principles of sampling, but also it is a very hard trick to pull off. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? There's a reason why we look at records like Donuts
Yeah.
or Introducing or like Oh No's like Experiment and
Yeah.
stuff like that, Madlib records, and we're like fucking blown away. Like it's putting together and recontextualizing your influences into a single kind of track, and putting those tracks together, you make a fucking album.
Right.
And 180 gram beats is one of the best examples of that. And there's also great guest
A
appearances, a
lot of
little
guest
some
appearances.
on some
Yeah.
of them. Yeah, MC Meta of Garyon is
Mhm.
on here.
Seven's in there. Yeah.
Seven, yeah, Songchun,
Mhm.
who probably isn't that famous anymore, but and he kind of regressed a lot musically. But back then, he was a very good MC. Anyway, that is one. Um, the conventional reasons why, and it really put the whole sampling blueprint out there. Like so many, like there's no producer in Korean hip hop that escapes the influence of DJ Soulscape.
Of
And number
course.
two is turntablism,
Mm.
because at the end of the day, much like DJ Premier, DJ Soulscape views himself more as a DJ than a producer,
Yeah.
despite being such a great producer.
Mhm.
And this is one of the first instances of like DJ techniques that are on a record. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like the cutting
Right.
methods, the scratching and stuff like that. It was kind of still being done in clubs, but this was the first example, as far as I know, that it was actually recorded and put out to the masses in a sense, to at least Korean hip hop
Mm.
fan listeners. Like this is recorded material of DJ activity. So that's another reason why this is classic. Um, this holds up very well.
Mm,
This album, uh, like of course stylistically it's dated. No one does this kind of stupidly heavy boom bap anymore,
right.
or this kind of pleasant. Like this is very jazz focused
Uh-huh.
and stuff like that. But it's still great music. It was recorded cleanly.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
It's not overly dusty like old '80s
Uh-huh.
records. Like this, if someone's told me like this was recorded yesterday, I would look at it as a stylistic choice rather than a amateurish bad equipment kind of
Mm,
thing. So definitely peep this record. This is a very uh must know kind of testament
of course.
landmark
Yeah.
in Korean hip hop history. So definitely check it out. And DJ Soulscape has other stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, I think he's rocking a lot with the Fana
Yeah.
artists. He used to DJ, and I think he still did in like Sens concerts and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, so Soulscape is a legend. Definitely check him out, especially 180-gram beats. That's the album name. My second classic, old school classic, would be Verbal Jin's
Oh,
Accusations.
great. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I'm sure I have mentioned this record a lot of the times
Yeah.
before, but I actually never delved into it that deep as to explain why this is classic.
Yeah, that album's
Oh,
crazy.
wait. By the way, I have to tell you like what my standards of classic are.
Yeah, for sure.
Personally, I don't care. Unlike you, Daniel, I don't care how dated it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Like Michael Jackson's Thriller sounds dated. It's still a fucking
Oh, of
classic,
course,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. I don't care if it sounds dated or not. Dated being dated definitely has to do more with about how you will listen to the record now. But to me, classic is not about whether you like it or not. It's more about, or not even how perfect it is. It's more about if you how influential it was.
Exactly.
That's the only thing I care about, whether the record being classic or not. Like a lot of albums that I consider classics, I fucking hate.
Mm,
Um, but I still consider them classics because if you remove them from, let's say, you can remove them from hip hop history, shit would have gone a different like on a different way.
mm-hmm.
For example, the Lil Yachty mixtape, the Lil Boat mixtape,
Uh,
the first Lil Boat
yeah.
album. I still can't fucking listen to it. And I'm pretty open to that shit. I'm pretty open to new shit, but that album really is going too far for me. The guy's offbeat, like it barely functions as music at all.
Mm,
But I still consider it a classic.
mm,
If that mixtape didn't happen, we wouldn't be looking at hip hop like that is like hip hop these days. You
mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Lil Yachty was basically an example like of what the Sex Pistols did for rock. You don't have to know how to do
Right.
shit. It still becomes music, right?
Mm,
Um, so with that in mind, I'll explain the context of Accusations. By the way, Accusations is not the classic in the way that Lil Yachty's Lil Bo mixtape is. Like, Accusations is a fucking perfect album.
mm,
There was a huge one of the biggest factors in Korean hip hop in the early Korean hip hop was disparity among players and rappers about how you're going to rhyme.
mm-hmm. I
Um,
remember that.
there were largely two factors, two waves, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, two teams, two sides, I guess. One side was we don't have to rhyme,
Mm,
which is looking back fucking stupid, but it was more about like how insignificant rhyming was.
mm-hmm.
You just have to rhyme a single syllable for it to work.
Right.
The other side was no, what the fuck are you talking about?
Uh-huh.
That's why Korean music sucks. We have to rhyme properly. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And in this kind of context, Verbal Gent was the main head figure of the side that said we have to fucking rhyme.
Mm,
If it's not rhyming, it's not hip hop. And this led to so many diss records going back and forth.
yeah.
And Korea, being even more conservative than it is right now, people hated Verbal Gent for it. Like, why are you so arrogant, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, you are not fit for society, kind of.
I remember that.
a very totalitarian method of thought here. And he was surrounded by haters. Like even in the Modern Rhymes EP came out, because his tone wasn't as like furnished as it is now. It didn't seem that like high quality compared to the people who were dissing him. In retrospect, it was, but people couldn't kind of look at it looked at that way back then,
Right.
which was like the early 2000s. So Verbal Jint's like first career, like the first leg of his career, is basically hunting down whack MCs and saying fuck you to all the haters who kind of misunderstand what hip hop was. They thought hip hop was more about the message rather than the music. And granted, message is important in hip hop, but if you're a whack MC, it doesn't fucking matter, right? Go and do spoken poetry or something is what I mean. And that's how it should have been. So Verbal Jint was surrounded by all these enemies in the scene, like the listeners shitting on him because they didn't want to admit that he was making better music than all of their favorite rappers. The dude was Rakim, basically.
Yeah.
This is the album that shut everyone up. This was the album that elevated Korean hip hop. Like, this was the album that killed off the I don't have to rhyme type of guys. Like, this was the quintessential, like, pesticide
He silenced everybody up. He silenced
Yeah.
everyone.
Like, this was what he was talking about all this time.
Crazy
This dropped in 08. This justified his arrogance for, like, a period of almost a decade. This was the album that was like, nope. This was the albums that made haters go, wait, we were wrong.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of haters. Like, this was a very big thing in Korean hip hop. It was like 50-50, 60-40 kind of deal, whether we have to rhyme or not. And this was the album that showed them that you don't have, like, being an MC is not about being a celebrity. This being an MC is not about, like, being submissive. Being an MC is not being, like, putting forth bullshit and covering up with motives over the actual quality of the music and stuff like that. So this basically removed, like, the musically incapable rappers from the scene entirely. After this album dropped, all of them disappeared. Without this album, we would have been still listening to, like, Soteji kind of rap. And this provided the blueprint, the real blueprint, because the Modern Rhymes did it.
Right.
But Modern Rhymes didn't have the production value or the, like, the tone that VJ has right now, or the breath control. So this was the finalization of the Modern Rhymes in a sense, when it comes to the attitude, when it comes to the technique, when it comes to production, everything. And this became the standard. This is like our Illmatic in a sense. Not in a societal, cultural context, but more in a musical context. You know what I mean? It was everything before this album is shit. You know, this, like, at least when it comes to rapping only, everything out before this album is inferior to this album. That's how significant of an album this is. This became the blueprint of how you have to flow, how you have to rhyme, how you have to put words together, how you have to, what kind of attitude you should have when you're approaching hip hop.
Right.
You know what I mean? This isn't exactly like the fuck commercialism kind of thing, because that's a whole nother discussion. This was more about, like, at least you have to be this good as an MC, whether you want to be commercial or independent, whatever it is. And this ushered in the golden age of Korean hip hop in a sense, because this was 08, and I keep talking about 2008 in this podcast. This was when you had rookies like Sens coming up with his mixtapes, Swings, Simon D, Han E, who was actually good back in the day. Like, all of the rappers that kind of was the technical pinnacle, still to this day, came out because of this album, and came out with this album, and this was the representation of that kind of monumental shift in Korean hip hop. So, of course, this has a certain loose narrative to it as well. So it also kind of showed rappers how to put albums together. How it's not just about putting dope songs together.
Right.
You should actually kind of think about how to put albums together and stuff like that. So, like, even the Soul Company records. Soul Company, granted, is one of the few movements that Verbal Jint actually said was dope. Like, they were on the rhyming aspect of things. But even if you compare it to Accusations, like rapping wise, they can't compare. That's how far
Mhm.
ahead like VJ was ahead of the curve. Like the rest of these motherfuckers sounded like Run DMC,
Mm.
and this sounds like Volume 2 era Jay-Z.
Mm.
The smoothness is incomparable, is what I'm
Yeah.
saying here. This is the album that said fuck you to everybody. This is what you should listen to. And it actually worked.
Mm.
Like after this album happened, no one cared to listen to the I Don't Have to Rhyme kind of guys, and they
Mm.
faded into obscurity. One of the most known rappers for in the We Don't Have to Rhyme category was a guy called UMC.
Mhm.
He had a lot of potent messages in his songs, societal
Mm.
messages, but his music sucked in retrospect. I still don't understand how it blew up. Um, but I guess this is because I am pretty young. But guys like UMC just disappeared. They never
Mm.
made music again. I mean, they did put out music, I guess, but no one listened to them. Why would they? They have no reason to.
Yeah.
And so it's not like Verbal Jin is not like stupid when it comes to lyricism. He's
Oh,
a
he's a
very
smart
good
guy.
lyricist. Yeah, like there's a reason why VJ is called GOAT by so many other
Yeah.
players you know. Like fuck, CK has a whole song dedicated to
Yeah, I
VJ.
remember that one.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was like the album that set the standard
Yeah.
for everything. So that happened, and just listen to it, you'll understand what I mean. The other is 2015's Essence the Anecdote.
And why am I not surprised?
Yeah, of course. Now, this is our Illmatic. I know I just used the
Uh-huh.
Illmatic metaphor for accusations, but that was only in a musical sense. The Anecdote does what Illmatic did for us. Um, One of the greatest things about Illmatic, aside from the musicality of it, is its cultural
Yeah.
significance. Hip hop to me has always been a great art form, not just because it elevates and puts the spotlight on the rapper.
Mhm.
It puts the spotlight on the environment around the rapper.
Yeah.
It captures a certain environment that they're from. There's a certain quality of regionalism in hip hop music that transports you to wherever it is talking about.
Right.
You listen to Illmatic, you're transported to the ghettos of New York. You listen to Company Flow, you're in the subways of New York.
Mhm.
You listen to Southern Player Catalytic, you're suddenly in Atlanta. You listen to The Chronic, you're mentally in a lowrider cruising through Compton.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what always have been the great thing about hip hop for me. So that almost unconscious fusion of the environment and the artist within the music never actually happened before in Korean hip hop until the Anecdote,
Mhm.
because there are glimpses of it, of course,
Right.
in biographical songs, but it never translated into a full album. Before this album, we were superficially talking about hip hop, um, quote unquote, most Def said this, like it was some giant in the mountains,
Mm.
as if it was some kind of philosophy to the point where we don't know what it is. We talked about it as if we were talking about the Hegelian dialect or something.
Hmm.
Hip hop is a very daily thing.
Right.
It's a very tangible thing. And the Anecdote kind of proved that, because this album focuses on the environment around Essence, as Essence, like, it's very biographical,
It really is, yeah.
and it's you can see glimpses of what Korea is like as he's talking about it.
Mhm.
All the societal ills of Korea, all the lots of names in Korea, like location names
Mhm.
in Korea as well. Like this is what Seoul, this is what Gyeongsan, which Eason is where Essence is from. Like what Korea feels like. You can hear Korea in this album, the way you can hear New York in Illmatic. You can also see glimpses of like Korean hip hop history, like
Yeah.
with the whole hip hop company on the song Next Level.
Oh, yeah.
So you can see it's a complete kind of almost a documentary film
Mhm.
of what Korean hip hop is, but it never explicitly tries to be like the hip hop kind of guy.
Yeah.
He's never talking about hip hop in a very superficial way here. He's not like saying like hip hop should be this, hip hop should be that.
Right.
He just shows what hip hop is just by narrating his life.
Mhm.
A person who has lived hip hop doesn't have to necessarily say that this is hip hop or not. He has nothing to prove, right?
Mhm.
So this album is the first instance I think in which that kind of naturality ebbed off.
Mm.
And this was the first album that kind of truly like blurred the distinction of Korea's reality and the supposed Korean hip hop scene.
Mhm.
This is what Korean hip hop should be talking about. And giving that standard is such a hard thing to do. There's a reason why records like Illmatic are one of a kind.
Right.
And this album did that. It's technically masterful.
Yeah.
The production is insanely pristine. It's raw, dusty as fuck, but it's somehow very well recorded at the same time.
Mhm.
The cold, dissonant air like really gives you the feel of a metropolis, of a survivor in the concrete jungle kind of
Mhm.
vibe, which is basically what Soul is about. This is one of the representations of the average Korean person's life,
Mhm.
done in such a hip hop way. And that's what hip hop should be about.
Yeah.
It should, I mean, the swagging and the money thing is always all great. It always
Yeah.
is. And there's even a Murray narrative on this album as well.
Mhm.
But it's more about also who you are as much as where you are from.
Mm.
Like that uh, complete synchronization of one's identity and one's surrounding and translating that into art and into music is one of hip hop's greatest achievements
Yeah.
that not many other genres have succeeded in doing. And Anecdote does that. Before this album, there was not an album that have quite done this to the degree that Anecdote did.
Mhm.
There has been attempts, like Yanghua, for example. We talked about it,
Right.
right? But Yanghua doesn't as great of a record narratively as Yanghua is. It's not an indictment on the entire history of Deepflow as a person.
Mhm.
Like Sense's anecdote starts when the narrative of the anecdote starts when Sense was a fucking teenager,
Mm.
before all the hip hop shit, before like everything. Like you can see why the ordinary Korean teenager from a countryside would be attracted to hip hop and how he progresses as a rapper, how he improves and manages to find success and then falls over again. And
Mhm.
now he realizes that his whole life was hip hop. Like that's basically the narrative of the anecdote.
Wow.
Yang Hua doesn't go that far. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So this is like the first, you know what? I'll clear this all up. This is the first instance in which we have seen the portrait of a rapper in which his entire life history synchronizes perfectly with what hip hop culture has always think and said was real.
Mm.
That's a like once in a lifetime kind of album.
That's a great way to put it.
This
Yeah.
is the reason why I put Essence on such a high pedestal.
Mhm.
Not just because he's a great rapper, because he's a fucking amazing rapper,
Mhm.
poetically, lyrically, flow wise, performance wise, beat choice, everything as he's a fucking master. But at the end of the day, the reason why I put him as the number one MC spot is because no one has the cultural significance that Essence has.
Mm.
Period. You could literally destroy every other Korean hip hop record in existence and leave the anecdote.
Yeah.
Then one day we will still have the same kind of hip hop
Mhm.
that we have right now. This is the core of the core. This is the middle of the middle kind of record. This is the kind of record that the entire culture is kind of built upon.
Mm.
And no one knew what that foundation was supposed to be named. And it turned out it was titled The Anecdote.
Mm.
That's it. Like, there may be more rappers that can probably rhyme better than him. Like Pharaoh Monch is a better rhymer than Nas. But as much as I like Pharaoh Monch, he'll never be a Nas.
Of course. Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about here. That's why I put him on such a high pedestal and put him like this record on such a high pedestal.
Yeah.
Like, and with this whole weed thing as well. Like, it's almost his weed charges almost has a societal kind of resistance kind of context to it as well.
Mm.
If you think about it, in such a conservative country, doing weed 3 times and going to jail for it is kind of revolutionary.
Mhm.
And that kind of context works with hip hop as well. It's about being fuck you to the system,
Right.
right? It's not like Essence is hurting anyone either. Like, so this is amazing. No one can replace Essence, and the reason they can't is because of this record.
Right.
This is the foundation that everyone knew about, but it didn't know what it actually looked like.
Mhm.
And Essence kind of showed them what it was all of this time. This was the record that everyone was trying to make, and Essence kind of did it first.
There you go. Yeah.
He was the first one there. Yeah. Now, this classic is a very recent one. It's 5 years old now.
Mhm.
Now we have talked about Elmatic. Well, not Elmatic. We have talked about the anecdote, right?
Mhm.
Now, what happens post anecdote
Ooh, curious now.
is what I'm talking about here. Because if you think about it, anecdote was basically the result of what everyone was trying to do,
Uh-huh.
what every boom bap rapper aspired to do.
Right.
Even trap artists, like if you're a rapper, you try to pull off the anecdote, and now Essence did it. Now what we're gonna do? Now what are we gonna do?
Mhm.
Like traditionalism has reached an apex with the anecdote, right?
Mhm.
And as much as there are many great boom bap records coming out, it will never be as significant as this,
Mhm.
unless it really revolutionizes the game in ways that even I can't anticipate. But so what happens in Korean hip hop is, you know what, we did everything we can do with boom bap. Now it's time to move forward.
Mhm.
And one of the progressive, so called, not in the sense of like the societal context, but when it comes to the musical context, there has been a lot of progression in Korean hip hop with a lot of autotune,
Mhm.
with rappers trying to incorporate more melodies into their music and everything. But there was a fundamental problem. Uh, they weren't good.
Yeah.
Like there were shining stones. Sick Cave sucked at the beginning, but he became progressively better.
Mhm.
Uh, SoundCloud rappers, a few of them were alright, but like 90% of them were trash.
Mhm.
You needed some kind of record that set a standard when it comes to melodical emo rap.
Mhm.
Something that showed real artistic vision.
Right.
And out of nowhere, the one who no one expected puts out that album, and that's Jamm,
Uh. Okay.
the Kung record.
Yeah.
Kung sets a standard for everything post anecdote.
Wow. Okay.
This was a period in time when rappers were using autotune not as a creative tool most of the time. I'm not trying to generalize here. As more of a mask rather than a tool.
Okay.
They were using it to cover up how bad they were. And when
Oh.
people shitted on it, people then they would use to say, "Oh, you're just hating on autotune." No, motherfucker, you just suck. So you needed some kind of album or an artist that came out and really set the standard as to show them why they're fucking whack.
Mm.
And CJAM did that with this record. First of all, the production of this record that is handled by Jay Kidman. Oh my fucking god.
Yeah. It's an insane project, no doubt.
Kidman is a genius.
Yeah.
Because this was when like Lil Peep was on this rise and Tentacion was still alive and Juice World was on the rise and people were just copying that formula over and over again.
Yeah.
The same drab ass guitars, a little bit of moo, and you just croon on the record, put autotune on it, and say that I'm a sad boy and it's all fucking finished. No. That's what Korean hip hop was like.
Mm.
It was like, how did it become this trash kind of a thing? I'm not saying Lil Peep was this kind of guy. I'm saying the people who were ripping off of Lil Peep sounded like this.
Mhm.
It sounded drab, uninspired, unoriginal, and just plain incompetent. And it was the same thing over and over again. A same very come as you are Nirvana kind of riff, and you riff on it, and they say you're an emo rapper, and that was it.
Mm.
What Kung did was actually try to switch the game up to show that the instrumental palette could be way more potent than this.
Right.
The first opener of that song of that album is called 원래 난 이랬나, right?
Mhm.
That is Brit rock inspired.
Oh.
If you listen to it again, that shit is not grunge. That shit is not alternative rock like everyone else doing at this time. That had a very Brit rock kind of influence to it. It's a very up tune with a very like key piano keys going on and
Mhm.
stuff like that. No one heard of this kind of shit before, and was like, this is weird. And he's using autotune over it, but it sounds so smooth,
Mhm.
which is weird. Usually it sounds very grating. At least at this time period, when Korean rappers were using autotune, it sounded very grating. Then
Right.
how is he pulling this off? It's because he rhymed properly.
Yeah.
This was the first instance in which a rapper that's using autotune this blatantly rhymed so impeccably.
Mhm.
Jamm was a great rapper before
Oh,
this.
yeah, no doubt.
He had trouble making good albums, but he was a very capable rapper,
Mhm.
and he put that kind of skill. He retained that lyrical construction with him,
Mhm.
and just switched the musical template. So that Kung record did two things. First of all, it actually taught autotune rappers how to sound smooth,
Mhm.
because the problem was rhyming,
Yeah.
as it always is. The problem is rhyming. And the second is he actually tried to switch up production with this.
Oh,
When
okay.
everyone was just being a very downgraded version of fucking Kurt Cobain of all people, they were all like Nirvana ripoffs at the end of the day.
Mm.
He actually tried to bring in lots of different elements of electronica, trap music, other genres of rock, and recontextualize it into an emo rap platform.
Mhm.
There's a very heavy Oasis influence to that record.
Yeah,
It really is. If you go and hear it
it
again,
does.
then see, yeah, seriously, there's a
Okay.
very Brit rock inspired to it. Then there's like trance influence on some of the
Yeah.
trap beats on there,
Uh-huh.
like, and of course you have the quintessential emo rap as
Mhm.
well. So it's like this is what emo rap is supposed to be, not just rapping on trying to be like a lightweight Kurt Cobain, but actually dealing with mental abuse,
Yeah.
actually dealing with addiction in these dark topics, and innovative and something that is creative rather than just slacking off a persona.
Mhm.
Because the whole sad boy movement is is such a shame.
Mhm.
It ended so abruptly because one of the superstars of that genre, which was Lil Peep, Juice World,
Right.
and Tentacion, all passed away, right?
Mhm.
And granted, Tentacion was a fucking piece of shit. I don't care. He was a domestic
Mhm.
abuser. I don't give a fuck about him. But musically, he had place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when all three superstars of a certain movement passes on, the genre dies.
Mhm.
Like imagine like during the 60s, like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were all killed in a single car crash or something.
Uh-huh.
We would be still listening to Frank fucking Sinatra.
Right.
Yeah, and this consequentially led to like because of the loss of leaders, new innovators didn't come out.
Mm.
So the movement just ended when it had a lot of potential with a bunch of Kurt Cobain ripoffs and shit died off.
Mhm.
It gave way to like grime and drill.
Right.
And it's very ironic in a sense because like many people like the Jam record because they think it had done like imported the genre perfectly, but
Mhm.
that's not for me. It actually tried to build on what was considered emo rap at the time.
Mm.
I dare you, I fucking dare you to find an emo rap album that sounds like this.
Be difficult. Yeah.
No one. I mean, a couple songs might be similar, but the entire palette that this album has, you won't find it. You
Mhm.
period. You won't. You will not find a record that sounds like this. And which is so incredible. Like I really want to know the recording process of this album and the inspiration process behind this because Korean hip hop has a problem of being a pioneer because you copied it
Mhm.
first. This record is not a pioneer because it copied it first. This album actually recontextualized mainstream emo rap.
Yeah.
If a record like I dare to say this, if an American rapper came out with this kind of record, it would have been an entire different story for emo rap as in general.
Uh-huh.
That's how groundbreaking this record was. Like I still haven't found an emo rapper that can do what Jam did with this.
Yeah.
Like the first song alone, I dare you to find a song like that. In other genres, maybe. In the rap spectrum, no, you're not going to
Mhm.
find a song that like that. So this record and the whole like the rock star persona I talked about,
Mhm.
I still don't like it, but you have to admit this was the first. This was the precursor to that.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
Everyone, the whole rockstar persona is basically C Jam's construct.
Mhm.
The whole rockstar thing that started in the Korean hip hop, like everyone is saying rockstar instead of rap star, that was because of C Jam.
Mhm.
Everyone wanted to rip off C Jam. After this Kung record dropped, like Young B switched up his
Yeah,
style.
that's true.
Kid Millie
Yeah.
switched up his style. Noel they switched up his
Yeah.
style. SoundCloud rappers became talking like suddenly began to have a wolf cut and
Yeah.
like I don't necessarily like the influences of this record
Mhm.
because it gave way to so much bullshit because they kind of didn't understand it
Mhm.
properly. But this record is still kick ass and it you can't deny it. This changed Korean hip hop. This changed Korean hip hop in a way that no other record did, in a sense almost.
Yeah.
If like the anecdote was a final confirmation of everything that you were trying to do, Kung was really one of the very first instances of something that you didn't even hear in the States manifest
Yeah.
into an entire movement. Problem is, of course, no one lived up to it.
Mhm.
I guess the person who came closest is Sick K,
Yeah, debatable. Yeah.
maybe.
I
I
give you
mean, I'm
that.
not saying he did.
I'll give you
Sick
that.
K doesn't
Yeah.
have a single record that is better than Kung, but at least he didn't disappoint me.
Yeah.
All the other people who are trying to imitate CJM disappointed me. Ash Island is on the track, I guess.
Mhm.
Like Ash Island wouldn't have happened without this record.
Mm.
Sick K's rock persona wouldn't have happened without this album.
Mhm.
Like this album was basically responsible for every rock influence there is in Korean hip hop nowadays.
Mhm.
You know the whole fashion statement as well, like the back hair is long.
Yeah.
Yeah, C-Jam did it. That's why they're doing it.
Wow.
Yeah, like when it comes to fashion wise as well, like the drip of C-Jam is basically the archetype for every like emo Ash Island type rapper that is out
Yeah.
right now.
That's true.
That's
Uh-huh.
how influential this album was. And just look at the rhyming. The rhyming is impeccable. Like, oh god, that album is such perfect. That's a perfect album.
Mhm. It's definitely a
That's one of the
high quality
yeah.
album.
That's one of
Yeah.
the albums that really smashed my prejudice about trap rap and stuff like the
Nice.
emo rap and stuff, which is kind of ironic because like the states emo rap never did it for me,
Mhm.
except for a couple of records. But it's actually C Jam that did it for me. Like
Mm.
this was why I kind of looked at emo rap a different way and realized that there's so much potential.
Yeah.
It was such a shame that the leaders of the game had to pass on before actually
Yeah.
having the time to grow. But I guess that's more of an indictment saying that we shouldn't do lean anymore.
Yeah.
Don't do lean, please. Don't do lean.
Yeah. So, yeah, man, we discussed a lot about different classics, very diverse, and just kind of give our,
Mm-hmm.
opinions on it. Hopefully, we get more classics in the near future. And so, as we begin to slowly wrap up our show, as usual, any artist or tracks that you're currently listening to and would like to share or recommend to our listeners. For me, you know, watching this season of Show Me the Money, it was really good to see Basic back again. It's been a while since I've seen him, and there's a debut track that he had, or he has. It's called "Better Than the Best," and it came out in
Who?
2007.
Who was it again?
Basic.
Who you're talking about? Oh
It
yeah.
was with mild beats, and
Hmm.
yeah, this is just a pure hip hop track. This watching his semi-final performance, the '08 Basic, definitely reminded me of that "Better Than the Best" type, you know,
Hmm.
Basic. Not the sound itself, but the
Hmm.
lyrics, like just him rapping, and it was really good to see. And if you're new to Basic or want to get into Basics music, I highly recommend you checking out Basics. Better Than the Best. Yeah, it's just pure rap.
I'll come up with a very recent artist. This album came out 2 days ago. There's a rapper called Kwai, Kwai.
Hmm.
He's kind of a rookie. I think The most prominent album he put out was in 2020 September, and it was called Flowering 4. But that was last year. 2 days ago, he put out an album called Entropy,
Mm.
with the producer named Irene, and it's kind of abstract. It's an abstract hip hop record, but it has a very sonical immediacy to it.
Mm.
It hits you. It's not like you have to like really try to understand what music is going on. Like the flow wise, like lyrically is very abstract, but the flow wise and the beat wise, there's a certain uniqueness and experimentalism to it, but
Mm.
it adheres to like the basic fundamentals of what makes it click for a listener. Like it hits hard,
Okay.
and the flows are great. The tone is very a little bit goblin ish.
Okay.
It's very fierce, hard, a little bit of hardcore influence in it as well. So it's a great record. It's a very experimental record. Personally, I didn't get it when Kwai was getting hyped back in the like last
Mm.
year. Like he seemed capable, but he didn't have that it factor for me. But
Mm.
I think this album does it for me.
Oh wow.
Interesting bars, great production, excellent sequencing. Check this out. You won't regret it. Because it might not be for you, but at least you won't say, "Ah, this shit is trash."
Yeah.
Like, and if you like it, you'll really fucking like it. Especially if you're into some experimentalism. So
Mm.
definitely check it out. Entropy by the rapper Kwai and producer Irene.
Nice. Yeah, well, that's
Yep.
all the time we have for today, but please do comment and let us know what other K-hip hop albums do you think are considered classics. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please go and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms and please give us that 5-star rating. If you want more K-hip hop contents, go check out Daytona's Instagram at myk_Daytona for K-hip hop album reviews and also follow our social media page at Seoul_Therapy. Thank you guys so much and see you guys next time. Peace.
Peace.